Around the World at 90 Knots, the Chipmunk Circumnavigation by Squadron Leader Bill Purchase, MBE. It's a long way around the world in one of these, Bill would often remark. I spent many happy childhood days in the crew room at RAF Newton whilst we worked on WG 308, and it was there that Bill handed me a copy of his book, and in it he inscribed, "To John, you may fly one someday," April 2000. Bill was one of the main instigators in getting 308 back to RAF Newton and flying again. My first Chipmunk flight was with Bill in 308, and his last flight in the Chipmunk was in 308 with me at the controls. In fact, it was back over RAF Newton. Sadly, some of you will know that Bill died last year. This reading of his book is in his memory and marks the 25th anniversary of that amazing flight. So, without further ado, Around the World at 90 Knots, in Bill's words. Exercise Northern Venture. The epic journey begins. Tuesday, 20th of May, Cranwell, London City, Manston, Munster. An exciting day dawned, with bright skies and a hint of dampness in the air. Meteorology confirmed that the en route weather to London and Manston was fine, but warned of the risk of fog patches locally around Cranwell as the light breeze stirred up the damp air. Last-minute loading of our 25 pounds of personal baggage did not take long, and the Chipmunks and Islander were readied for departure. However, one small problem arose. The photographer hadn't arrived. Final farewells were said, numerous photographs taken, the official Godspeed wishes proffered by Air Commodore John Ford, Commandant Air Cadets. We were ready to go as the breathless photographer eventually arrived and was squashed into the Islander. As we entered the runway for takeoff, fog banks, which had been lurking around the airfield perimeter, were beginning to drift towards our intended takeoff point. The Islander applied power and took off, but as Sed and Bill increased speed and raised the tails of their aircraft into the flying attitude, they were enveloped by a solid wall of dense fog. Undeterred, the takeoff was continued, and the fog cleared at 300 feet for a southerly turn towards London. The takeoff was reported as quite dramatic by those observers on the ground. It was certainly interesting from within the cockpit. The Chipmunks would only reappear at Cranwell on the 21st of July after the successful circumnavigation of the Northern Hemisphere. Our route to London City overflew Cambridge Airport, where No. 5 AEF and Marshal's personnel lined the dispersal to wish us bon voyage as we buzzed the air traffic control tower and then continued around the Stansted control zone to Dartford Bridge. From there, we flew under air traffic direction along the Thames to the compact London City Airport. After a tight circuit and steep approach to land, the Chipmunks were taxied to the ramp and then parked alongside the Islander at 10:05 hours. Time on the ground was limited as with only 5 parking spaces available at City Airport. Our slot was required for a scheduled arrival soon after 1100 hours. A press conference attended by television, representatives from our generous sponsors, Air Vice Marshal Tim Jenner, the Assistant Chief of the Air Staff, Group Captain Philip Owen, the Director of Elementary Flying Training, the Russian Air Attaché, Commander Anatoly Baharev, all heard our last-minute plans and we were ready to go with only minutes to spare. As our departure was in some small way a celebration of the 10th anniversary of the opening of the airport, the odd bottle of bubbly was cracked open to toast the occasion. Unfortunately, we had to get down to the business of flying our aircraft around the world and couldn't imbibe. Despite being packed to the gunwales, a space was found on the Islander for a rugby ball signed by Rory Underwood, the England winger, and it was given to Cadet Warrant Officer Kirtley for conveyance around the world. Also loaded were a crate of whiskey and a box of cigarettes, duty-free of course, which were to prove invaluable later down the route and used as bribes and sweeteners whenever an official looked as if he could delay us more than necessary. Comments were made to the effect, "Why take cigarettes when no one on the team smokes?" But we were well aware of the usefulness in the more remote and primitive areas of eastern Russia. On schedule at 11:05 hours, Tony and Bill rolled down the eastern lee runway and set course for Dartford Bridge, 15 miles down the Thames. turning towards RAF Manston, a Sea King helicopter from RAF Watcham, complete with an Anglian television camera crew, rendezvoused with the Chipmunks to record their departure from the UK. Once airborne footage had been shot, the Sea King increased speed and pulled ahead to be able to record our arrival at Manston and be ready to conduct final interviews before crossing to the continent. It really emphasised the sedate progress of our own aircraft, watching a chopper accelerate away into the distance. Whilst refuelling the Chipmunks and Islander, it was discovered that a can of hydraulic oil had sprang a leak into the cardboard carton in which it had been stored. An immediate cleaning operation swung into operation, and cans were repacked into a more substantial box which could be stored in an upright position in the Islander. Lunchtime sandwiches were delivered to the aircraft, and the possibility of continuation into the continent was considered. Weather conditions at Munster were forecast to be good, with the likelihood of thunderstorm activity over the Low Countries and Western Germany. With the forecast of a high probability of a deterioration in weather conditions overnight, we decided to push on towards Munster whilst the weather held. Bill and Tony got airborne at 1400 hours. Across the channel the weather was fine. However, further down the route, storms with lightning and thunder had to be negotiated to avoid the worst of the rain. Landing at Munster after 2 hours 40 minutes in the air was a coming home ceremony, as we had visited the airfield on our return from Moscow after our aborted attempt in 1996. The Skylark call sign, with the addition of Chipmunks Around the World, certainly got us preferential treatment from air traffic control. Replenishment of the aircraft was achieved with typical Teutonic efficiency, and the minivan took us to the local village of Leidenbergen for a comfortable night in the Hotel Zapost. Over a hearty Wiener Schnitzel, we reflected on the achievements of the first day. We were pleased by the fact that in 4 hours 45 minutes Chipmunk flying time, having left the UK behind, we had landed at 2 airfields before reaching Munster in Germany, having crossed Belgium and Holland, and we were now well into the continent. With the channel behind us, the next major water crossing would be the Bering Strait, half a world away. The pattern of having the Islander land first at the destination airfield became established as standard procedure and was to continue for the most of our journey as we flew towards the rising sun. Our first daily report detailing progress was transmitted to Bulldog Operations at Cranwell, which was established as our message centre for the whole expedition. Manning of Bulldog Operations on a 24-hour basis was to continue throughout, with a team of 6 junior officers enjoying a period of rest before recommencing their military flying training. Wednesday, 21st of May, Munster, Berlin-Schonfeld. Overnight, the forecast weather conditions had arrived exactly as predicted. We awoke to low cloud and rain with poor visibility. In light of this weather, we enjoyed a leisurely breakfast before arriving at the airfield at 0:30 hours. Our formal weather briefing was conducted by the most flamboyant meteorology briefer of the whole round-the-world trip. Silver nail polish, long bouffant hairdo, earrings, gorgeous blouse, and shining silk trousers, rounded off with chunky high heels. The overall image was somewhat tarnished by the fact that, being on duty overnight, he badly needed a shave. Awaiting better weather conditions gave an opportunity for a teach-in of the British Telecom MobiQ SATCOM to all team members, and from the air traffic control car park we were able to talk to Bulldog Operations at RAF Cranwell and Philip Owen in London. Philip was one of our supporters and fundraisers and hoped to join us for part of the trip later down the route. The MobiQ was simplicity itself to operate, and proved to be one of the most invaluable items of equipment throughout the whole trip. There is no doubt that without having such reliable communications to obtain clearance for landing and route changes from the central control in Moscow, the Russian sector would have almost been impossible, as up-country telephone systems were unreliable at best. Well done, BT. It's good to talk became a team phrase time after time in the depths of the Siberian wastes. A brief on the digital camera and information transfer to the laptop was only given to the younger members of the team, as some difficulties in understanding the technology and jargon was experienced by the more classic pilots. Having collected the interest of $40,000 from Cranwell before departure, Bill divided the currency into 5 equal plain brown paper envelopes to distribute to the team. The theory being that if any individual was robbed, most of the money would be safe with the rest of the team, and we would not end totally destitute if this happened. The procedure worked well, and Bill took the funds back from the individual team members as and when required. Heavy rain persisted throughout the morning, but eventually a clearance presented a window of opportunity for flight to Berlin. After startup, Sed experienced severe rough running of his engine with a massive magneto drop way beyond limits, necessitating a change of sparking plugs on WP962. The problem was probably caused by dampness in the system after the 12 hours of almost continuous rain which it had experienced. Once serviceable, the Chipmunks were able to take off at 14:10 hours for the journey to Berlin-Schönefeld across the flat German terrain. During this sortie, a sharp reminder of checking positions entered into the Garmin GPS was experienced. Misprogramming of one of the waypoints had occurred, which could have been very embarrassing, but old-fashioned map reading revealed the error at an early stage and corrections kept the aircraft on course. This error so early in the expedition gave a solitary lesson on navigation: check and double-check all positions and routes. Subsequently, it became standard practice to program the Garmin with the aircraft parked side by side to enable the pilots to cross-check route distances down to the second place of decimals before being satisfied with the results. Such was our meticulous attention to detail that this mistake at the early stages of the expedition proved to be the sole navigation error of the whole trip. When we landed at Berlin-Schönefeld after 2 hours and 20 minutes, we had barely time to replenish and service the aircraft before a massive thunderstorm vented its spleen on us for some considerable time. We gave thanks for the fact that we were tucked away safely inside the General Air Traffic Operations building. Once the rain had cleared, we moved to the Albergo Hotel on the civil side of the airport in the former East German sector of the city. This hotel, although of excellent quality, is sited between a noisy main road to the front and a busy railway line to the rear, giving one the choice of trucks or trains to make sleeping difficult. We had used this hotel on our previous attempt last year, and because of its proximity to the airfield, it was chosen again.